Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, thanks to those who are joining us live, and welcome to those who are going to watch this recorded. We are so fortunate today to have Dr. Dan Weiss with us, who is a graduate of our MD Ph.D. program from the class of '88. And he is a pulmonologist physician scientist who is engaged in translational research and has a really successful NIH-funded research program and is very interested in understanding lung regeneration after acute lung injury and has been involved in gene and cell-based therapies. And so I don't want to give too much of it away because I think we're going to hear about your story. But welcome, Dr. Weiss, or Dan. I think it's okay to call you Dan. And I wonder if you could just start us off sort of telling us about your journey from your MD PhD experience until now.
No, that sounds good. And thank you for the opportunity to interact with you all and reconnect with Sinai, because it's been quite some time and all that. So I'm what I hope a role model for up and coming physician scientists. I think it is a phenomenal life if this is what grabs you. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I got to where I'm at as follows. So I grew up knowing I wanted to be a scientist, right? And so that was part of, thinking and planning. And I always loved zoology and marine biology. And, back in the day, we all watched Jacques Cousteau on TV, right? And I don't know if Karina, you know what that is, but it was a marine biology show. And we all wanted to be marine biologists and the like. But then I saw when I was in college that the idea of combining science and medicine really opened up so many opportunities and so many doors. And so when learning about the MSD program and the possibility of doing the MD PhD, it was a natural fit. And so I was very fortunate to get into the Sinai program and had an absolute blast. And I want to come back to this later on, because one of the questions Jason sent me to think about was, how do you navigate doing an MD PhD and handle all the stresses and demands on your time and things like that? We can talk more about that. But for me, it was like finding home. So I finished up the MD PhD in '88, and then I went on to do a residency in internship residency in internal medicine at the University of Michigan. And then I fell in love with pulmonary and critical care after doing my first ICU rotation, and went on to the University of Washington to do a fellowship in pulmonary and critical care, and then stayed on there for a while as faculty before I got recruited to the University of Vermont, where I've been for 20 years now. And right now I'm a full professor in medicine. I'm actually an affiliate professor of bioengineering, biomedical engineering. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well, because sometimes your pathways lead in directions that you didn't really anticipate when you were first going into it. And so right now, I still do both. So I'm about 30% clinical, which means I help run the medical intensive care unit. And I see lung disease patients, both on an inpatient consult service, as well as outpatient clinic. But then the rest of my time is running a research program. And it's a program in lung regenerative medicine. So we do lots of really interesting things in trying to fix broken lungs. And that spans a spectrum from trying to grow new lungs outside of the body, to 3D bioprinting lungs, to using stem cell-based therapies, to using gene therapy-based approaches for a range of lung diseases. So emphysema as a more common disease, but also pulmonary fibrosis, and also acute lung injury. And this is very cogent right now, of course, with COVID and COVID-related respiratory failure and acute respiratory distress syndrome. So we've been able to keep our fingers in a lot of pies all throughout. So how do you balance all this stuff, right? So all along the way, after the MD PhD, during internship and residency, you're pretty busy as an intern and a resident learning your craft. But most programs have some protected time for research. And so you have that opportunity to keep things alive. Same thing in fellowship. where after the first clinical year, at least for pulmonary critical care, you have protected time to do research again. So you're able to kind of keep things going, but really there's a hiatus between the time you finish medical school and the MD Ph.D. program until, if you go that pathway, until you're able to get really back into it with the degree of time and effort that are going to make things work out. And so learned a lot of things along the way in terms of how to balance this lifestyle and life, how to enjoy it, and thoroughly enjoyed it, and how to be a real person as well too. We had our 32nd wedding anniversary this past fall. I've got 2 grown-up kids. I do a lot of sports. I'm a musician. I run 2 music festivals, one in Vermont, one in Seattle. So I play bass, classical bass and all that. So the point being is that you can, if you have the energy and the enthusiasm and the interest, but most importantly, if you found what floats your boat, then this is a great life. And so with that as kind of an overview, Taya, Jason, Alexis, Karina, what do you want to talk about?
It's pretty unique that you have that split that you do. I feel like most physician scientists we talk to have kind of picked one route or the other. The majority of people who are like successful at research do it full time. Yeah. So I'm curious if you could talk about like why you maintain that split, how it happened, and what it's like doing that.
All right. No, that's a great question. Back when the MSTP program got going, right, the vision from the National Institutes of Health was to create that cadre of triple threats, right? Clinical research and teaching, right? And so we were all trained and we all had it in our head and our vision that we were going to do all of it. And some people can do it, but reality is reality. So sometimes you're better at one than the other. Sometimes the circumstances of your life or your employment really dictate that you're going to go focus more on one than the other. There is but the important thing, there is no right, there is no wrong. It's again, whatever works out for you, both in terms of your own personal time, your personal satisfaction, but reality is, right, what kind of job are you going to get out there, right? It's tough to get an academic job. We all know that. Industry beckons in so many different ways and the like. So, but the beauty of the program and the beauty of your training, the beauty of your experience in the MSTP is that you have that broader base. You have potentially more doors that could open to you, whatever you end up doing down the road. So I hope that's addressing your question, Karina.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious about your particular journey. Like, was there a point at which you chose this, or did it just kind of happen? I'm like just curious where you were intentional about making decisions to be at this place in your career.
Yeah, so I may be a little bit off the bell curve, because I always knew I wanted to be a scientist. I mean, when I started thinking about it growing up, and so to me, the pursuing the medical school and the MSTP and combined MD PhD was being able to take the interest in science and integrate it with medicine. And you hear these soporifics about bench to bedside and bedside to bed. It's true if you choose to take advantage of that. There are a lot of really cool things that I've done that have gone back and forth between the two. So to me, yes, do I want to be a doctor? Absolutely. Do I want people to get better? Absolutely. But I just see this as, for me personally, individually, science driving a lot of what I do. Make better medicine.
Makes sense. Thanks.
And Dan, I wonder if you could talk more about sort of you're describing your breakdown of the sort of 30-70 and this idea of being a triple threat, and then you also said that you feel like you have figured out how to balance your life and your lifestyle. So how do you do all of that in a day's work? how do you find time to do your clinical work, find time to do your research, find time for your family, for your music? How do you prioritize?
So there are lots of ways to skin a cat. The first thing, I'm going to do a little end run around that, is when you wake up in the morning and you're excited about going to work. All right, that's 90% of the battle. All right, because then you can just figure out how to manage your time best. All right. Were there times when I'm here working late at night? Yeah, of course. Were there times when here on the weekends? Absolutely. And like, do I have a wonderful wife who supported this? Absolutely. Right. So there is no great answer to that. And you learn with doing, and you learn by experience, and you learn that, okay, I can manage my time in this way or that way. I can come home. I coach my kids' soccer and little league teams, you know. So what that means is you come home late afternoon, you spend time with family and kids, and they all go to bed, and then you're on a computer late at night and things like that. So that's just one concrete example of doing it, but it just it fits in over time. But having a supportive environment and having a supportive social system, use that term, is huge. And so if you're lucky enough to find that or create that, okay, and I mean it by created, you know, you're the master of your destiny. And so if you want to be doing all these things, you'll make it happen, and you'll figure out how to make it happen in a positive, constructive way that everybody benefits from.
I'm curious as to whether you feel like you've, or what kind of challenges you feel like you've had to deal with and how you dealt with them along the way.
Oh, that's a good point. So challenges are multifold, right? And so so let's just pick a couple and explore them. So do I want to be a good doctor? Absolutely, right? So the challenge is trying to do the best you can in intern residency and fellowship, and doing the best patient care you can. Is it possible to keep up with everything in your field? No. And you learn that along the way. And so you learn that having a good set of colleagues and a good team is really critically important. There shouldn't really be anyone out there except maybe family practitioners in rural areas who are really on their own at this point. And I think you all, being at Sinai, would appreciate that. So I'm part of a really great team. So that's helped me do good medicine. All right. Research wise, right? The challenges are, you gotta, at some point you gotta pay for yourself, right? So you go through all the trials and tribulations of learning how to write grants and getting grants, and everything else that goes into academic success, writing manuscripts, getting your name out there in the various ways to get your name out there, so that you create a track record, and so that people recognize who you are and respond hopefully positively to that as well. So Alexis, does that kind of address what you're after? Or are there more specific challenges you were thinking about?
No, I mean, I think that's a good answer, because I think a lot of times when we not that I'm at the end of my career, but I think sometimes when you look back on your career, it seems like everything is so nice and neat and fit together and like A to B to C to D, but it's really like a lot of times it's a winding path to get where you are, and so it's always like neatly the bow.
Yeah, no, that's right, and it's not everybody's going to succeed. All right, we're not sugarcoating this. This is a very involved life and lifestyle, but it's your life and your lifestyle, right? And so this isn't just a job that you turn off when you go home at night. But are there times when the grants didn't come through, and you're here in the wee hours trying to scramble because your funding is going to run out and things like that? Yeah, of course, we all go through that. And I'm looking at this with a little bit of golden hindsight, that the things have been good, right? But they're always small. There are always challenges along the way, and you just compartmentalize and deal with them as best as you can. Now that's generic sounding and alike, but again, keeping a positive attitude, remembering who you are, remembering that this is what you want to be doing, right? I don't want to be out there doing full-time clinical practice because that would just kill me, actually, right? I get burned out in the ICU. You get bored after a while. I don't want to be full-time in the lab either because, again, you have this ability to go back and forth. And that's the beauty. I actually sometimes really enjoy going into the ICU so I can get away from the lab for a while, right? So I think you had a...
We have a question in the chat. I have a question that's sort of related to Alexis's question. One of the things that I'm struck by is that your clinical work involves care of patients in the ICU. And I'm wondering, as we're talking about feeling either out of practice or doing it a lot.
Great question.
Do you ever worry about taking care of these critically ill patients and feeling like the fact that you're not doing 100% of the time might put you at a disadvantage?
Yeah, no, it's a very important, very cogent and good question. And so I have done hundreds and hundreds of procedures in the ICU over a 30-year stretch, right? So central lines, intubating patients, etc. Am I as good as my younger, I hate to say this, younger colleagues who are in there now? No, of course not. All right. But this is where it gets back to know thyself, right? I know my strengths, I know my limitations. And let me give you an example. I can interpret ultrasounds when the fellows are doing them. So point of care ultrasounds at the bedside. But don't ask me how to turn the damn machine on because I don't know how to do that. All right. So if you understand that and evolve, you can be a good clinician, all right, and have all that experience of how to deal with and how to teach and how to whatever. Here's your differential of hyponatremia, and here's what we're going to do for this patient today, right? That shouldn't go away. Technical things, no, they're different. But here's why it's so good being part of a team. And the ICU medicine is team medicine. And so the fellows are going to do the procedures, and I'm going to stand there and watch and wave at them and things like that. Does that make sense? I'm kidding around a little bit, but you understand the point. Yes, of course, skills will wax and wane, but as long as you are aware and acknowledge and have the resources for people who are more adept than you at whatever, it works out well.
Great, thank you. And Karina's asking about the physician scientist role and how it's evolved over time. So since you graduated, do you see differences? Are there things that have remained the same?
Yeah, so that it's also a great question. So let me give you a historical context, and Ty, you may appreciate this, right? So when I was doing the MD Ph.D. program, me and my compatriots and my buddies, that we were all gung-ho, we're going to be physician scientists, right? But then the reality and the data that I was aware of 20 years ago, right, from the MSTP training program outcomes was that it was really the minority of patients of trainees who actually went out and embraced the physician scientists existence. The vast majority of MSTP trainees ended up in private practice, right, or academic full-time clinical, right? All right, now I don't know what the numbers are more recently, if you will, and you'll have a better sense of that, tell you. But and there was a small cadre way back when who went into industry, and that was a very small. It's probably a whole lot more now. So for the people who enter into the program, I think just from a numerical standpoint, it probably is still the minority who end up trying to pursue the physician scientist. Now, having said that, what's the substance of being a physician scientist, right? And it's changed from the perspective is that in 1988, right, you still had some possible conception that you could really be that triple threat, all right, and do it all and be the best of the best of the best, right? And you have to be realistic about that. Medicine has changed so much. Science has changed so much. We didn't, actually, you'll laugh at this. When I was writing my thesis, for the PhD portion, that was when desktop computers were just coming out. All right, and it's mind-boggling, isn't it? But you understand the rationale. So I think the role of the physician scientist, the conceptualization of physician scientists is you can still do a lot, but you're not necessarily going to be master of the universe, right? And as long as you're good at what you do and you can focus and contribute medicine and science, that hasn't changed. And so if that's what you want, if that's what you still want to do, then that fundamental core is still there. Logistically, yeah, it's just hard. It's harder. It's always hard, right? Because if you want to get an academic position and you're going to be trying to pull in grant money and do clinical work, it's a lot of work. So,
As
Karina,
a follow-up question,
yes, of course.
yeah, no, that was a really, really good answer. I'm curious as a follow-up question, you know, I'm a third year in the program right now, right? So if you're a physician scientist entering kind of, you know, thinking about your future and reaching like higher levels of your training, what are your thoughts in terms of thinking about future careers and keeping like multiple avenues open, or like even looking in more diverse areas than one might have originally traditionally, like, you know, envisioned a physician scientist in? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that for
okay, no,
people graduating now.
So third year, I take it this is your first research year?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, good. So I think one overarching answer is just sit back and enjoy the ride. Okay, you have protected time now to do research, but this is protected time to look around and investigate different ways of doing things. All right, and so whatever your research track is, whoever your mentor is, and we'll come back to mentors because mentors are critically important. Then say, you know, I'm gonna make up an example, but it's real life. I'm focusing on, you know, my benchtop stuff. There's this company, or there are these couple of companies out there who kind of doing similar things to what I'm doing, or things of interest to me. Back then, we didn't really do that. Now, of course, you should be doing it, right? And you create that link with industry or what have you, and just see where that may take you. Another just kind of broad basket thing is that traditionally we're all brought up that the National Institutes of Health was godlike, right? And if you wanted to be funded, you know, NIH funded or National Science Foundation. So what I've learned over time is that there's a lot more out there. So if you're doing research in cystic fibrosis, go to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, talk to them, see if there's cross-fertilization that occur. We get a lot of funding from the Department of Defense. I never would have thought of getting DoD funding back then, but it's out there and it can be potentially germane to what you do. So if you understand what I'm trying to say, just keep your eyes open, right? Keep your ears open. And everyone's on the computer all the time. So just follow your leads and see where they may take you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's good advice. Thank you.
Yeah. And so let me go off on another tangent too, which is mentoring, right? So one of the key things that's going to help shape your thinking, your life, your approach to science, your future success is having a mentor that you really jive with, right? And can relate with. And so hopefully that's the case for you. And this is someone who's going to take an interest in your development as a person and your development as a scientist, and who's going to help network for you. And so if you're not finding that to be the case, then think about it, right? Because this is an important component in any career development, not necessarily science, but it's so important in science. So I do hope that's the case for you. And what I found also too is that the MSTP program was really supportive in that regards. You know, like I actually had changed mentors in the course of my thesis work, and like for good reasons, right? And the program was totally supportive and helpful in every possible respect regarding to that.
And can you say more about that? Because actually changing mentors is something that often students think is the worst possible outcome. And so it's really nice to hear that you felt supported and that you were able to make that pivot. Can you tell us more about that?
So my initial mentor was a wonderful individual and the like, but it became clear that we were different people. And it's not that there was antagonism or animosity or lack of support, but it just turned out that that individual's interest and mine were doing this. And so I looked around for a while within the other faculty at the time, found an individual who I had developed a good relationship with on a personal, individual basis and scientific basis, who I ended up doing my thesis with. What I did for my thesis was something that this individual didn't do, right? But they were supportive and let me develop scientifically, right? Over the course of that period, that 3-year period. And it turned into a great situation. And Dr. Crowidge, Terry, back in her prime, back then, was completely supportive about this. And so it was a good situation for me. Now, there are all types of permutations, right? You could end up with a mentor that, you end up hating or they hate you, or there's something bad that happens, right? Then you need to get out of that as soon as possible. And I'm assuming that the program will be completely supportive of that as well, too. So, Talia, I think, does that get to what you were thinking about or trying to get at?
Yeah, absolutely. And on this topic of mentors, I wonder if you could also talk to us about who else do you consider mentors, your scientific mentor, who along the way have been?
Oh, all right. That's a great question. So Karina, as you develop as a scientist, right, or clinician, whichever pathways you end up, you're going to meet lots and lots of people, right? Who are going to be people who are your teachers, your trainers, your supervising resident during internship, your attending on the wards, things like that. And some of these people are going to be people that you connect with, right, on multiple levels, and you'll recognize this, and you'll develop those friendships and interactions, and it brings up the concept of a sponsor, right? There's a mentor and a sponsor, right? So a mentor is someone who is directly responsible for your career development, like your thesis advisor, right? And again, they should be looking out that you're learning all the right things, and they're teaching you not just to do science, but on the benchtop, but to conceptualize science and to then design your experiment, carry out your experiment, learn all the techniques, interpret your data, then learn how to present your data, communicate your data in every way, how to write grants, manuscripts, all that stuff that is all part and parcel. But then a sponsor is someone who's not responsible for all that, but yet it's someone you've met along the way who you resonate with. And that might be someone that your mentor introduced you as a colleague in the same branch of science, or it could be, again, you're attending on the ward when you're doing a clinical rotation, who is going to help you out along the way and help it. And what does that mean? That means they're going to advocate for you. They'll write letters for you for whatever. They'll introduce you to other people of similar interest and what have you. And like, so be very open to that. And one of the things that people that by and large I've run into along this journey is that people want to help, right? If they see someone up and coming who is showing interest, showing enthusiasm and the like, people love that. No, they tend to love it, right? No, it's a it's a real world out there, but with a spectrum. But by and large, people respond to that. If you go to Dr. X and say, I've read your work, I'm really, I'm interested, I like it. What do you think about this, this, and this? 99 out of 100 times, you're going to get a very positive response, right? And so that's the type of relationship you can develop, and then utilize as makes best sense. Again, for your career development.
Just along those same lines, how else do you nurture like a mentorship relationship? Because I think, now that I think we're also, in the position to be mentors,
Yep.
you do notice that some relationships will work out better than others, not necessarily because of personality, but sometimes a lot of it is like take, but, I guess, can you talk a little bit about that?
But it's a dynamic thing, right? It's also, there's so many permutations on situations that can happen. What's your ideal situation? You've got a great mentor who is at a good place in their career, where they're confident, and the like, and so they can sit back and help you in every way. All right. On another end of the spectrum, you've got someone who is, again, this is making this up as I go, but they're not in good shape. They're struggling in their own research. They're funding, whatever. They're utilizing you as fodder. You're going to go do all my work for me, type thing. Now, this is caricature, right? But there's all gradations in between. And there's how do you know this going into it? Well, you don't always know this, right? You think you may know, and then things evolve over time. But what do you do then? This is where it's important to recognize your available resources, right? And say, it's just not, it's working great. I'm very happy. Great. It's not working well, or it's really working abysmally. You go and talk to the support services you have. All right. No one is out there to sink or swim on their own. Again, and that's an important thing. You're never alone. All right. So if you're having issues, you have people to go speak in confidence. In Flip, right? So there's been a lot of emphasis over past number of years on mentoring the mentor, right? Because nobody really teaches you necessarily how to be a good mentor, right? And so I don't know if you have it there, but you learn by doing, right? But you also, there's training out there. And we go through periodic training on mentorship, right? And so I'm assuming that that's something that you may do as well. So again, it's a more integrated way of life. It's a more integrated system than it used to be. And with the idea that there should be safeguards and safety nets and definitions of things, if you will.
Great, thank you. So I want to shift gears a little bit and ask you how your life has been impacted by COVID, career-wise.
Oh, as a pulmonary critical care physician, really?
Imagine.
So we, it's interesting. We've had it here in Vermont, northern Vermont. We just haven't been hit as hard as you guys have, or as most of the rest of the country. So, sure, when COVID hit 2 years ago, everyone was in panic mode, right? So we made all the preparations for lots of sick people. We had satellite facilities out at the fairgrounds, and the ice rink, the ice arena was converted into a mobile hospital. And then we never used any of that stuff because we just simply did not have that many patients. But so we had to change focus clinically, but it didn't really pan out. Right now, when I've been in the ICU, at most we have 6 patients with COVID. All right, and dare I say it, they're all unvaccinated. But there are a couple who immunocompromised, vaccinated, and it's horrible, right? So we've had to shift and do all the things that you did, but on a lower scale. So that wasn't that bad, actually. With respect to the research, yeah, we had to close the lab for about 2 months. And since I was designated a critical personnel, and I was able to designate a couple of people in lab as critical resources because we had cell culture and animal experiments going, so we needed the personnel in there. We were able to keep the lab going. So I never really had to shut down my lab. And we were up and going full strength really by May of 2019, 2020, whatever it was. So we simply did not get hit as hard, either clinically or research-wise, as other parts of the country. What we were able to do is take advantage of COVID from a certain standpoint. So there were a lot of grant opportunities, research funding opportunities as the pandemic hit, because things were scrambling, right? So I'm involved now in a number of clinical projects looking at cell-based therapies for COVID. And actually there was a large trial at Sinai of mesenchymal stromal cell, mesenchymal stem cell infusion of for the COVID ARDS patients. And like this is by a company called Mesoblast. So I'm part of that. I also was able to shift gears a little bit in terms of benchtop research. So we actually saw an opportunity to try and understand better what the virus was doing to the lung epithelium, right? And not the virus replication and that thing, but actually how did the virus kill the lung epithelial cell and make it dysfunctional and lead to acute respiratory distress syndrome and being on the ventilator. And so we actually got funding from the American Lung Association, right? And so was this something I would have ever thought of doing prior to COVID? No, we're not virologists, we're not, but it was an opportunity to try and do something good for which there was a big chunk of money. And that's the reality of doing research and the like. You end up doing things sometimes that are not directly what you set out to be. You know, your trajectory, you think it's going this way, but it's really like that, right? And then you got multiple directions and multiple irons. And that's part of the fun of doing biomedical research, right? Things lead to something else. And as long as you have the bandwidth, energy, enthusiasm to do it, then this is great. So this brings me back to this other point I made earlier, that I'm an affiliate professor of bioengineering at University of Vermont. I'm not an engineer. I didn't take any engineering courses in college, but I've learned a lot of biomedical engineering along the way, and we apply it to a lot of the research we do, like, for example, growing lungs outside of the body, and other things. And so it just says that there are things that are going to come up along the way in terms of your scientific career that if it resonates and it makes sense, you embrace it. And you know, 5 years ago or 2 years ago, or pre-COVID, I never would have thought of doing COVID research. So it's that type of thing that you never know what's going to happen, but if you can take advantage, make the best of it, then that's totally great, if you will. A parallel thing along those lines is that back when you know, none of us really thought about commercialization. All right, we were doing all these really cool ivory tower things, you know, because we're academics, right? But over the past, you know, 10 years, give or take, you know, realize that a lot of the kind of cool stuff we do in the lab has got commercialization potential. Yes, it's going to help you cure a disease or figure out some scientific question, but the real life is out there. You know, it's of interest to industry. So we've got a couple of patent applications and things like that. And again, I wouldn't have thought about this years down the road, but it's part of what we think about now as well too. So again, it just it's part of continued scientific evolution, if you will.
And related to that, one of the questions is, how do you avoid getting too excited about too many different directions and going down the wrong path? How do you know what are good choices and what are maybe not such good choices?
Yeah, so there's no good answer to that, right? Sometimes, sometimes things are evident, right? The research you're doing is clearly going from A to B in a straight line, and it's going to work, and it's whatever. And a lot of that, for example, if you end up being a physician scientist doing more clinical trials, right, than basic benchtop research, there's the trial may not work, but it's more of a straight line. Otherwise, too, the approach that I've taken is this. I've got too many pies, too many fingers in pies at this point, because you never know which one is going to work out, right? And so, again, it's bandwidth and having good people around you that you put together a team, because who knows what may pan out. And let me give you a concrete example. So when we're trying to grow new lungs outside of the body, we take lungs and we treat them to get rid of all the cells and like, so we've got these three-dimensional scaffolds that we can then put cells back into, presumably from a lung transplant recipient and all that. But when we do that, we strip away the pleural lining. And so it's kind of like a big sponge. So we had to spend some time trying to figure out how to make an artificial pleural coating, right? Artificial pleura. So we went through a variety of different materials and the like, and came up with something that was seaweed based, alginate based. And then we were sitting there thinking about it, and we realized that, there's an immediate clinical application for this. And Alexis, tell you as well, you may be familiar with this, bronchopleural fistula. So traumatic injury to the lung or something like that. Sometimes you get big holes and the air leaks out, and yes, you can put a chest tube in and evacuate the air, but you haven't fixed the hole. And so what we realized is that this material we developed to grow new lungs outside of the body could be used as a pleural sealant, a Band-Aid for the lung. And so we spent, that's taken off. And we're going to be actually hopefully moving towards clinical trials with this new Band-Aid we developed. Again, it wasn't part of the master plan, but it was, I don't know, be kind of silly about this. Chance favors a prepared mind, or on the other hand, chance favors, the unprepared mind, and it just strikes you sometimes. But that's the point, right? And it gets your point. How do you decide what to pursue? You never know. And if something kind of strikes you one day and it fits and it looks promising, then pursue it if you can.
Do you work with industry as well?
I do a lot of work with industry now. And so I do both consulting work, but I also have sponsored research agreements, so that industry is giving me money to do research and the like. And that's a long cultivated dance that you learn how to do and develops over time. But it's not like you can just call up Johnson & Johnson and say, hey, give me some money. You develop a relationship over time with individuals in the research areas within a company that dovetail, that interact, that overlap, whatever, with what you're doing, and then see where it goes, if you will. That's so simplistic, but I think you get the idea.
Wonderful. Well, as our hour is coming to a close, I want to ask if the group has any more questions, and I'll give a moment in case anybody wants to jump in.
I guess any last words to someone so early in their MD PhD life?
You took my question. That was going to be
no. It's a great question. Particularly because you're third year, right? So the first research year. Just sit, lean back, open your eyes, and enjoy every minute of it. All right. There's so much out there to absorb and to try and jigsaw puzzle pieces to figure out what path is going to be good for you. But don't do it by yourself. Use your lifelines, okay? Use the mentor, okay? Use people you've met along the way. Talk to the other MD, PhD students further down the trail, if you will. Talk to Talia and the other people in the office and the like. And then just realize that, again, you've got all these resources and that you don't have to decide anything right now, right? Everybody, you know, we're all caught up in this, you know, fast forward where you want to map out your life yesterday. And when you're in the position you are, we all want to do it, right? Everybody tells you, nah, you don't have to do it. You really don't have to do it right now. Just at least not for the next couple of years. Just let the system support you as you develop your interests and directions.
That's great. And I guess as one of the questions often comes up about how, like, sort of how to know what your plan is, your career plan along the way while you're in this training, which is very long. And don't worry that you took my question, Karina. It was a good question. Thank you. What would you advise in terms of people thinking that they want to figure it out? You mentioned sort of the career path for physician scientists over time. About 70% of our alumni, as well as sort of nationwide, are ending up in the academia setting, and they're splitting their time differently between clinical and research.
That's a big change from way back when, and all that. So that's interesting. Let me rephrase it. It's a big change from what we were led to believe the outcomes of the MSTP training was, in terms of where individuals ended up. So no, just you got a long road ahead of you, right? But you chose this road, all right? And so just step by step, and again, focus on the moment, so you can make the best of the moment while keeping your eyes open. These sound like platitudes, but there's no better way to describe it at this point. All right, let me give you one other example too. My thesis was endocrinology based, cell biology based, with an endocrine slant, right? So I was gung ho on endocrinology when I went into internship residency, and then that first ICU rotation as a second year resident, the lights came on. You know, who cares about endocrinology? But that's the beauty of it. You never know what's going to happen, when it's going to hit you, but you're be in a position of strength when whatever it is, comes down the pike.
Wonderful. Well, I would like to thank you so much for this session. It was so fascinating to hear about your career trajectory and how you're leveraging your training, and an inspiration, I think, for trainees of all stages to hear about how they can envision their futures and how that may change over time. So thank you for sharing. And I will applaud. We can all do like a silent applause or something. Yeah,
Oh, that's all fine. No, I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm very passionate about this, and that's why I wanted to re-engage with everybody and the like too. But just on a small side note, Karina, you're third year now, right? You said, right?
Yep.
So Kevin Weiss, is that somebody you've come across?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. He's, I mean, incredibly brilliant. Very one of like the smartest kids in our class.
He's a cool kid. Everything. So I think you figured out I'm his dad. So, all right. Anyways, thank you again. And Talia, Jason, Alexis, I'm happy to do this anytime you want.
Your son is an MD, PhD currently?
No, he's a straightforward MD.
He's a third year student now. Is that
third year student? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Wow, great.
Great.
Yep.
Continuing the Mount Sinai tradition. Very nice.
Yeah, well, my dad was a surgeon at Sinai, and my brother and I went to graduated together. Science. He's a gastroenterologist with Sinai right now. So yeah,
Wow.
kind of a strong. So Tony Weiss, Anthony Weiss, and so yep, a little bit of Sinai in the blood.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for participating, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again.
Bye.
See you all later.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.